Let's start. Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to our webinar, our first ever webinar with ContactMonkey and SWOOP Analytics. Today we'll be talking about email or intranet, when to use what, or email and intranet, when to use what. We've had, I'm just saying, people joining, we've had over 400 sign-ups for this, so we can see the numbers are creeping up, but obviously this is a subject that resonates with a lot of you today. So today your speakers are, I'm just going to hand over to Kai and Ryan to do a little introduction. So Kai, do you want to come off mute?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi everyone, I'm Kai and I'm the CEO and co-founder of SWOOP Analytics. And so I'm a mix of a data nerd and someone who just loves internal communications, and delighted to be with you. Over to you, Ryan.
Yeah, so great to meet everyone today. Thanks for joining us. I'm Ryan Duguid. I'm the Chief Product Officer at ContactMonkey. Some of you may know me from a previous life, and it's interesting to me to be right back around here talking about intranets and the likes. I spent 8 years at Microsoft working on a little product called SharePoint, driving a campaign we like to call ECM for the masses, along with folks like Jeff Teeper and Adam Harmits. And it's fascinating now to be on the email side of that business and to be able to talk and share insights into how these two complementary technologies can work together to help drive an effective internal communication strategy.
Thanks, Ryan. And I'm Gemma Sain. I'm Director for Customer Success and Growth for North America with my wonderful colleague Coco Molina. So my world before SWOOP, I was actually worked in internal communications. So my world has been the intranets, mainly SharePoint, for 20 years of my world of intranets, and then internal communications was about 15 years. So I'm going to speak today more about the intranet side of things. So what are we covering today? So what we're going to look at is the importance of both email and intranet and how they can seamlessly work together, and help you think about when to use what tool when. We're going to highlight some examples and use cases of how email and intranets complement each other. And then we do want to stress today that, we are talking about internal communication channels. So we're talking about email, we're talking about intranet, and we're well aware that some of you may have other channels in the mix. So whether that's an enterprise social network, you might be using Teams, you might be using Slack. But today we're just focusing on intranet, email, and which are probably the most two used communication channels anyway. And then towards the end of the session, we just want to share some insights and tips. We both do benchmarking reports. We've got tons of information. What does good look like? And we want to share that with you. So what we want to do today before we start the session is use the chat. So introduce yourselves, let us know where you're joining us from, what organisation you're working for. Use it to network, internal communication audience, I think are a wonderful supportive crowd that get to know each other. And if you have any questions regarding what we talk about today, there's a Q&A button. So if you can pop the Q&A, your questions in the Q&A chat, that will be amazing. And then don't forget you've got reactions. So if you hear something that you in particular that resonates with you today, put the heart emoji up on the screen. So in the interest of time, Ryan, I'm going to hand over to you to kick off today's webinar.
Sounds good. So what we thought we'd do today is just kick off with a little bit of an overview about where we think email is the best form of communication now. I'm sure most folks on this webinar have been around long enough to have seen many vendors come and go with products that claim to be the email killer. Gemma, you just mentioned a few of those. Slack was going to kill email, Yammer was going to kill email, and yet for some reason email still hangs around. And so the real question there is, okay, why? What's its value, and when is it most valuable? And so let's take a look at where it shines for employee communication. And there's a reason that I think email remains the go-to channel for driving information out to employees. And when used well, I think it can deliver really quick impact. I think we can get measurable engagements out of it, and more importantly, it's designed to drive direct action from your employees. So think about upfront being able to send out real-time and responsive updates to your organization, getting timely information in front of your people. Think about things like CEO or company-wide communications, last-minute office closures, executive updates. Maybe you've had your quarterly financials released and you want to give commentary around that. Perhaps it's time at the end of the year for benefits enrollment, or crisis type communications when there's things that you need to rapidly be able to get in touch with. And fundamentally here, what you're doing is you're putting things front and center in someone's inbox. It's where a lot of us spend our time. We get our inbox on our phones. We're constantly striving for inbox zero. And so you're able to put that message right there at the top of that list for people when they need it the most. Now, second of all, email allows you to drive a level of personalization. So when we think about things like intranets, certainly you can target content within intranets, but you're not getting that Dear Ryan type experience. You're not getting that personal touch in the organization that makes someone feel like this message was tailored for them, tailored for the types of information that they need the most, and the type of the role they're in. And then the next point is about driving action. 9 times out of 10, when we're sending someone an email, it's not just for informative purposes. It's about driving some kind of action, some kind of engagement within the organization. Again, oftentimes we see things like signing up for compliance training, or taking those security videos we all love that teach us how to avoid phishing and scams and things like that. Perhaps it's some newsletters or some documents that have to be signed, but driving you to take that next step to get out of your inbox and to perform some action that the organization needs from you. Now, that's not to say it's not good for disseminating information. That's about you consuming it and being more informed, being more aware of what's happening in your business, but driving action is key. And then last up, with modern platforms like ContactMonkey, you're not just sending emails out into a void. We've got a way to track, to measure the engagement with those emails. So whether that's looking at the read-throughs, the click rates, whether that's understanding how much time people are spending, where they're spending time in those emails, we can give you that type of insights to help you fine-tune your email-based communication strategy over time. So hopefully that gives you a good summary of where we think email is best. And now I'll hand back over to talk about where we think intranet is the fit to complement what you're doing with your email communication strategy.
Thank you, Ryan. Yeah, I was just going to say crisis comms, definitely, when we worked in comms, to get to that information out there quickly, email was always the best way to hit the inboxes. So where does intranet sit in? So as I said, I've been working in intranets for a very long time, and I remember the days where they used to be badged as that one-stop shop, because we didn't have anything else. We used to throw everything at that intranet, and it used to be that area that everyone went to, very cluttered, couldn't find anything. And I think with the emergence of new technology, it's really important now to consider how your intranet sits alongside your other channels, such as email, such as a social network. And so you can think about more of how that content works for your employees, what the role of the intranet now is for your employees. So we've got some tips here to think about what the intranet is best for. So things like evergreen, that's static content that's long lasting, that's going to remain. So it's information about your policies, your organizational news, any guides, any information, any instructions that can sit on your intranet, and it can be accessed by your colleagues. They can go back time over and time again and just look at that content. Now, we've put long form resources. I want to take that with a pinch of salt. We're calling it long form resources, but we do know, and we'll be sharing a bit more information as we go along today, that people don't have a lot of time when it comes to intranets. There is a time budget. And so we say long form, but still think about the objective of the page you're creating. Why are people coming to your page? And keep it simple, and just chunk your content up as well. So make sure there's headings, and again, we'll go into a bit more detail. But with that content, so for me as a former intranet manager, my intranet was a place where everything was available, nothing was locked down, and it would really help people set them up for success in their day-to-day role. So that is how my intranet sat alongside other channels. And then obviously it is a central hub, so it takes you off to other platforms, key information, HR forms, company-wide news, what's on the menu today in the restaurant. That was always one of my top pages to visit, and so that's people just need to get there and find out more. And then obviously the analytics side as well. It's really important to understand what is working for your audience, what isn't working so well. Are there particular areas within the business that may need a bit more help? And so just having that data-driven analysis to really help you use that intranet. Intranets, you know, you're spending a lot of time creating these intranets, so you really want them to work. And that, you know, if it is that central hub for many of you, then you want to make sure you're setting your colleagues up for success. So just keep on top of that content, the age of the content, the health of your intranet, things like that. So deep diving into that, those analytics really help. So how do they work together? So we were talking about this, Ryan and Kai and myself, and it's not one or the other. It is definitely both, and that's how they complement. So Ryan, do you want to cover this slide?
Sure, and Gemma, to your point, is not only is it email and intranet, but as you mentioned earlier, you know, there's a lot of investment now in short form video-based communications, text-based communications. You know, with AI coming to the fore, taking textual content, turning it into audio-based content, just so many different channels. And it is important to think about how all these things fit together. More importantly, at the same time, you know, the last thing anyone needs is to have to do a lot of extra work and a huge lift to make that happen. So, you know, part of what we advise, and from my own background in the world of process automation and workflow, is how you can start to streamline that, both using, you know, more effective human-based processes as well as automation technologies. And so when you think about how to bring these technologies together, it's about recognizing the strengths and the, you know, potential limitations of each of these mediums, and then optimizing for what content goes where, and how you leverage each of those to amplify the other one. So when I think about email, I think about driving engagement, driving that action, but all the while prompting those next steps. So in the spirit of you know, the action that we want people to take, how do I get them out of the email, out of the inbox, and taking that next step within the organization? And that's where I look towards the intranet to do a lot more of that heavy lifting. So where is it that we're going to have that longer form content? Where is it that people will find the forms or the processes they have to interact with? Where will they view the videos that are giving them their training or their updates on policies or the likes? And so we like to think about using email to tease out that content, to drive a level of curiosity and engagement, and to guide employees towards those detailed content assets that are sitting hosted within the intranet. So it's about taking their attention, and then steering them in the right direction. Because the beauty of that is once you get them into that intranet environment, they can start to explore. If you have an effective intranet strategy, ideally someone doesn't just click on that one asset and then they're one and done. It's a chance to expand their horizons, to show them additional information, to have additional links or actions that they can take. More importantly, though, I think all of this is about respecting the employee's time. So Gemma, you sort of mentioned, you know, how you think about optimizing that type of content. I think all too often one of the mistakes we make, this is true in my world of product management as well as communications, is we take a very egocentric approach to it. So, you know, when I'm building product, oftentimes, hey, we've got these clever ideas we think will be valuable to the user. Or from a content perspective, hey, we've got this great stuff we want to tell our employees about. And we don't take the time to step back and ask them what is it that they're interested in, what would get them excited, what would make them want to take those next actions, how do they think we should design this content. So it's about listening as well, and then to your point around looking at some of those analytics and figuring out how we can optimize things over time. So what we've seen play out especially well is taking people from the emails, getting the right snippets of content in there, the right grabby headlines or that little summary paragraph, and then you know, click here to read more, click here to take that next action, where we're reinforcing each other, and then ultimately using segmentation and figuring out how we can target the right content to the right people. And then through that, when we think about how we integrate email with a SharePoint or an intranet environment, how we can drive audiences to the appropriate content hubs within that environment so that we can leverage the personalization on both sides of that equation. So hopefully that makes sense, because together you get a more effective communication strategy.
Absolutely. And it does always go back to, you know, what do they need to know, rather than exactly what you said, what do you want them to know? I think it's really important.
Yeah. There's a great book. The title is Nobody Wants to Read Your, and then there's a four-letter word that comes after that. If anyone's interested in a deeper perspective on this, that's always a good one, right? Because it's about putting your audience and their needs front and center. instead of your own. Sometimes a balance, right? Crisis communications. I'm not going to step back and say, gee, I wonder what people are interested in right now. They kind of need the news, right?
Yeah.
So there is a push-pull aspect to this, of course.
Are you okay to cover this one as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So, just sort of tactically, obviously with my own background and Gemma with you and Kai, we're covering both sides of the spectrum, and what we like to try to figure out, and certainly from a product perspective at ContactMonkey, is how do we bridge these gaps and how do we make this seamless and easy? So that's why on our side, we actually built native integration to SharePoint, also to Teams and exploring other types of communication platforms. And the goal here is to just make sure that with a few simple clicks, you can easily get your email content archived into a SharePoint environment, into a document library to help with transparency, compliance, long-term access, and then create a kind of a news feed, if you want, with a web part to help surface your most recent emails, to help people see that communication alongside the internet. So if they happen to be browsing the internet, they'll see some of this scheduled communication alongside of that. So there's a few key ways that we tackle that. So first up, we like to link the assets with a simple toggle of a switch and choosing a channel that you want to deliver your information to. We're able to push that data through to that specific SharePoint content hub or environment. As part of that, we want to make sure that it is optimized, so we are picking the right segments, the right places to deliver content to. The archival side of it's super important. So for our clients, oftentimes they want that long-term record of what was sent out to the organization. But then ultimately, and I think this is between ContactMonkey and SWOOP where we can help out, is providing the aggregate analytics or the data that starts to show how are these two platforms, these two channels of communication working most effectively for you. So are you getting the right engagement with the emails? Are you driving the right behavior and the right action to head on into the intranet? And from there, are you getting the right level of engagement with the broader set of content that you're distributing through that environment?
Yep, perfect. And I think also as well, that integration piece where you can have a reference to go back, I think it's super important, especially if you're finding that some of the emails that you're repeating campaigns, annual campaigns, for example,
Yep.
you can just store them, go back to them, reuse them. And I think sometimes just having that there as an internal comms team just saves time, creates sort of a seamless process for you to just look back on and see what you did on a campaign before, and then having those metrics, what worked, what didn't work, and then you can review that data and make improvements if you have to.
It's a great way to drive consistency over time as well. I think that ability to be able to see, okay, to your point, I mean, a lot of internal communications is scheduled, right? Everyone has a comms calendar. Many companies I deal with have many comms calendars across different teams or functions. And so there's a lot of consistency to that messaging, and it gives you that easy way to go back and just see, hey, what were we talking about the last time? How do we make sure we're consistent? We're not having overlapping messages, that type of thing. So,
Definitely. Okay, so if not many of you are aware, I'm not sure, we do benchmarking reports as well. So what does good look like? We can tell you that. So what we're going to do now is just share some of our insights and tips, what we've seen from email, what we're learning from Intranet. This is where Kai's going to take over. So I'm going to talk about some more slides in a bit. But this is just some tips today. We want you to go away from using this webinar today with things that you can take back to your job role, for you to remember, to try things out. And I think it's always about learning when it comes to internal comms. And things do change. Things are changing at such a rate. It's just great to be able to just understand what is working and gather the insights that we get and share with you today. So Ryan, I think this is your slide again.
Sure. So there's, really 4 key approaches from our side. And to your point, Gemma, we do the benchmarking. So every year we dig into our own data, as you can imagine. We have millions and millions of emails travel through our platform every year. And through that, we're able to understand in aggregate, and obviously protecting the sensitivity of all the data in there, what are the patterns of communication, what types of things are driving engagement, where we're seeing people drop off, all that kind of thing. And there's a handful of things come out of that. And if anybody's interested, go to contactmonkey.com. You can obviously download a copy of that report to see the types of insights that we're getting, both through our own quantitative data and then our qualitative research out across the wider industry. So the first thing I would share is around personalization and segmentation. One of the key things that any good email platform will let you do is leverage what we would call merge tags. And a merge tag, think of it as the old-fashioned mail merge in Outlook, but the ability to personalize aspects of the email. So anywhere you're building communication, you can put tokens into that email that specify, what's this person's name, what's this person's department, what's their role in the organization. So you can get super targeted with what you're sending out. And then through that, you can start to drive a level of segmentation to make sure that content, individual paragraphs perhaps, or snippets of content are optimized for a different audience that you're trying to get a message across to. So think about things like your London office maybe wants a different set of information in there than your New York office, even though you're sending out broader comms to the entire organization. So first up is about that segmentation. And one of the things that we found is that right now, only 28% of our customers tend to use this capability, but the ones that do, we see a much higher uptick in terms of engagement with that email, simply because the person receiving it feels like this is more geared up for them, less of a generic message. And so one thing that we'd encourage when we see this stat is we get back out to our customers and we try to show them the power of taking this little extra step to make things more optimized for the recipient of that message. So that's the first thing I would share. And if we jump on from there, we'll start to talk about what I would consider to be the most important part. I did a little pitch for this earlier, but it's about capturing feedback. It's about asking what's relevant. How did people find this? Was this appropriate communication for them? Was the scale of the information right? Was it optimized based on their needs and their role within the organization? And so one of the things that we enable you to do is embed anything from the most simplest thumbs up, thumbs down type response. Hey, did you like this message? Did you not like this message? To full-blown surveys. Tell us more, help us understand. Would you rate this on a scale of 1 to 5? Where would you place it? How could we improve this for you in the future? And so what we found is that you start to get a much higher click to open rate when you're using this kind of insight to capture the employee net promoter score, their feedback on it, and optimize and tailor it. And so, for that little bit of extra effort, now, like all things with surveys, it's not like your entire employee base is going to respond to these. But if you think about larger organizations, we have customers that send out messages to hundreds of thousands of emails. You don't need a huge response rate to this in order to get statistically significant data to help you optimize and tune things over time. And it is those kind of large scale communications where you really want to do that optimization, because if you think about sending an email out to 100,000 people, if it's not valuable for them, that's a huge waste of time and energy on the part of the company. And so you want to make sure you get that right. So that's that first part of it, personalize it, segment it. Second, proactively ask for feedback. We don't always like feedback. It can make us feel a little uncomfortable, but it's through feedback that we can all grow as individuals and improve the work that we do. So the next one, and perhaps this is the most obvious one for people, especially if you've spent time in the world of marketing automation and customer-based outreach, there are known times where email is better received, more likely to be picked up by your employees. And from our research, what we found is the best time is obviously Monday morning, surprising no one. But Monday around about 10 a.m. seems to be the most effective sending time, where you're most likely to get people that have come into the office, they're ready for the week of work, they want to know what's going on, they want to be informed. They've had the first part of their day to do a little bit of triage, to start to figure out what their work's going to look like for the week, engage with some of their colleagues, either online or in person. And then it's time to sit down and take a look at what's going on within the company. And so optimizing these send times, and more importantly, as part of this, optimizing the send time based on the location people are in around the world. So one of the things that we'll be releasing shortly is the notion of time zone optimized sending. So on a per segment basis, you can start to say, well, hey, I want to make sure that it's 10 a.m. in Paris, it's 10 a.m. in London, it's 10 a.m. in New York, it's 10 a.m. in Seattle, that people are getting these messages and opening them up. So we're essentially sending that around the globe. Now, that's not for every type of communication. Obviously, crisis communication, you don't want someone to wait until 10 a.m. in their time. You're going to be pushing that out straight away. But for broader based communication, we found that to be a highly effective strategy. And then lastly, it's ultimately about driving continuous improvement. So if we jump to the next slide, Gemma, analytics is key. Opinions are awesome. Opinions are always welcome. But data can trump an opinion in most cases. And when it comes to email-based delivery of content, there's a wealth of insights that you can start to get. So the types of things we like to provide you can see on the screen here. But how many people are opening this? How many people open it once versus multiple times? Are people forwarding this message around? Are you getting sort of a virality or a scale out of this? How many times are people clicking through the links? Are they clicking the links multiple times, or are they just going to them once? What types of devices are they using? Are they consuming this content on the desktop versus the mobile device? And so you get all this wealth of information to help you understand how you might optimize. As a great example, if you see everybody's consuming on their mobile device, that really starts to speak to a different type of layout in your emails, to a different amount of content that you're trying to put in there, because everyone's working through a tiny little screen. So by leveraging this, you can start to see, click maps. Where are people clicking? How often are they clicking there? When you've got surveys attached, what's the results coming in from that? So all of this has helped drive a continuous improvement. But the importance here is you actually take a look and you pay attention to the types of insights you're getting here. And then you ask why, because again, back to qualitative and quantitative feedback, you'll get a lot of data here. The surveys may give you a little bit of the why because people are feeding back real-time information to you. But it's important to take this data and get back out in front of the user community and ask them, okay, what is it about this that's working for you? What's not working for you? How can we improve this over time? What types of things would you suggest or recommend here to make this more relevant to your role? So just asking those questions, ask those 5 whys to get better insights and help you drive better communication through email.
Brilliant. Great tips, Ryan. Thank you so much. So we're going to now jump into some of our tips and insights for Intranet. So we do benchmarking reports. We've been doing benchmarking for 10 years. More recently, we've moved into the SharePoint space. So the data that we're going to be sharing with you today is coming from our latest SharePoint Intranet benchmarking report, which is released next month. But first off, we found, excuse me, that 93% of employees are visiting the intranet. So it's a huge amount. So you've got a big audience coming in to see your intranet. So it's really important, these 93% that are coming in, know where they need to go. It's not a mess, you're helping them. But they're only spending 6 minutes a day. Now, that's not a bad thing at all. But to get them using that 6 minutes, optimize the content. So back to what Ryan was just saying, it's really important that you think about that content and optimizing it for people to get the most out of it. So what we found is people tend to have, we've called it a time budget internally, and then they have that time budget. It doesn't mean that they're going to go and read more content. They know what they're after, and so they're going in, they're trying to find what they need, and then they're out again. So think about that 6 minutes per day, which equates to about 30 minutes per week when creating content for your intranet. But the fact that 93% people, I think Ryan said at the beginning, we've heard intranet is dead, things like that, intranet's toast, but we know that it's still, a great internal communication channels. And for some of you, alongside email, it probably is your primary comms channel. So so the fact that 93% I think is huge. So spend that time, invest the time in your intranet because people are using it. So I'm going to talk about the next slide, and then I'm going to hand over to Kai. So we've created some top tips here. So back to that 6 minute, get that important content straight at the top. We find that people are actually speed reading. So it means that they are skimming the content. So chunk it, give people headings, let people know what they're going to get. So make sure the objective of that page, people know straight away. Now, I'm going to say avoid PDFs and files and other files. Now, I think we could have a whole session on this, but for accessibility reasons, for readability, if people are using mobile phones, there's nothing worse than, pinching your screen and zooming in. And you don't go to other websites. I used to use this always as an example. You never go to a news site or you're shopping on a retail site. You never go off to access a PDF, only on restaurants when you want to look at the menu. So avoid PDFs. And also, if you're avoiding PDFs, you can get analytics for your SharePoint pages. So always make sure you avoid PDFs and other files. Back to that 6 minutes a day, keep that content concise. And you can see from the chart on the left that when we looked at all the pages, we looked at, you know, thousands of pages, lots of users. I'll let Kai talk about that bit, but we can see that the most average news article count for between 100 and 300 words. So when you're working with your intranet authors, if you have that decentralized model, just give them these top tips to really help them, because naturally, you know, sometimes your intranet authors, you know, they aren't there to write for the web, they're there to look after the intranet. They've been given this job, so just help them with some of this insights to just help them set them up for success as well as a content editor. And then the last tip is just make that landing page work. So whether it's your home page, whether you've got a landing page for a department function site, just make sure that you anticipate why people are coming to your intranet. And I can tell you, it's probably not to meet the team. Just think about, you know, why people would be coming to your intranet pages. Is it because they need to fill out a form to request something? Do they need a laptop? Do they need a PC? Do they need a, you know, their printer's not working, something like that? Okay, so just anticipate why people are coming to your intranet.
This one, Gemma, is a great point here in terms of compare and contrast, because, you know, on the flip side of this, when it comes to email, a lot of the time, you know, there's obviously, as we've just discussed, there's the goal to drive people to take action, to go to other places. But 9 times out of 10, we'll get like, hey, can you attach files to the email? And so you think of a classic one, like someone wants a, you know, hey, we'd love to drive you to a dashboard, but quite often people are like, hey, can you just give me that PDF? And quite oftentimes what we'll find with that is, well, I want to be able to grab that, save it for myself, have it around for, you know, perusing at a later date. And so this one's an interesting compare and contrast, right? Because in the email world, there's a lot of desire to have that attachment with the email. So it's interesting to see that difference between the two platforms.
And I would say as well, because you're that real time, and I think you said at the beginning, your email is that once it's out there, it's gone, whereas your intranet is that central source, that you know, long-term content. So when you have a PDF on an intranet, sometimes you encourage people to, so I worked for a company, all our policies were PDFs, so people would print them off, refer to them 2 years down the line, they were still referring to it. And then, you know, we've gone through multiple updates of that particular policy. So everything they're referencing is completely out of date. So I've had a lot of pushback. I've had a lot of pushback trying to get people to stop using PDFs and files on the intranet and just move to SharePoint pages. And as I said, it is that accessibility. So definitely for email, in the moment, send it out. That's there now. Just don't encourage people to save it on their desktop and refer to it 3 years down the line, because
and definitely save the planet by not printing too much paper, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So Kai, I'm going to hand over to you now. Your best place to talk about the Intranet benchmarking report.
Thanks, Gemma. I love the data bit, and I love the insights that you both provided on the data sides here. So I'll continue along for a bit with some other I think are quite fascinating and useful insights. We often being asked on the intranet side when it's a good time to publish, and you can see on the chart that marginally better, right, early in the week. And I think that's something we saw with Ryan's data as well. Like, I think it was Monday on your slide, Ryan. So early is good, but it's not like it's going to be a catastrophe to publish on the Friday, as you can see. It just, the problem though then is that we do know that most of the reading time is coming not soon after, so it's published. So you can see publishing on Saturdays and Sundays is not a good idea. I think it's a well-known secret for journalists, isn't it? That, a story you don't want anyone to read that comes up Friday afternoon. And I think that goes, maybe that's a secondary tip here. If you want something that no one reads, then weekend is the way to go. We also saw an interesting pattern. If you can always think about like an M shape, then there's sort of 2 peaks on the M, and that's also what we're seeing for people's reading time on the intranet. So we can see that most people read at around 9 a.m. and 2 p.m. So that's why we're suggesting that, well, you should put it up before that, shouldn't you? So it's there when people are visiting the intranet. So that's why we're saying publish it at either 8 a.m. or 1 p.m. Then then you get the you're certainly publishing just before the peak where people arrive, and making it easy to read. We actually we check for various different things when we are doing a content analysis, whether there's how long the heading is, so you don't have too long headings, and also the ratio between how many headings and paragraphs that you have. And we even look at something called the Lix algorithm for determining how complex text is. And what we found actually is that if you have a page that's really poorly structured and hard to read, people actually spend longer time reading it, and that actually probably not something that you're interested in. So the more well written it is, the more to the point, bullet points, good headings. It's actually good for screen readers as well. Then you get more optimal reading time. And then we, Jerry, you showed that 93% of people access the intranet. Of course, that's a really high percentage. And I must admit, we were thinking that, well, I know many organizations where they make the intranet the homepage. I'd love to see you guys if you can use the reaction button and just give me a thumbs up if the intranet is actually the homepage whenever you open your browser window. Yeah, I can see there's a lot of you that's doing that. And of course you can argue, couldn't you? Say, well, so no, of course we got 93% of people visiting the intranet, but they aren't really visiting the intranet. They are just going to the web, so isn't that sort of artificially inflating the numbers? And we thought that was the case. So to prove that point, we're also looking at the report and say, well, how many people visit other pages than just the intranet homepage? Because if they were just visiting the homepage, I guess then they wouldn't go anywhere else. So, but actually 95.5% of people do visit more than just the homepage. So for those of you that have that are doing that, I think that's just fine. That might even be a rather smart way of ensuring that some of that news and some of that homepage content really gets to people. All right, let's have a look at another one. Gemma said that people have a time budget, and Gemma also showed you a little chart that showed how long articles are by word count. And one of the interesting thing was that it doesn't actually really matter like how long or how short the content is. People tend to spend, it varies a little bit, but the reading time is actually not too different across those different bands of word counts. So to us, that really suggests that Gemma is absolutely right when she was saying people have a time budget. So you got people's attention for a relatively short amount of time. So therefore, by publishing more news, that doesn't necessarily lead to more views. So, and I do think there's a built-in risk. And again, I'd love to see some of your reactions to this, whether you directly or indirectly might feel that there's a bit of pressure to publish more news. And I think that's something, an urge I think we've got to be very careful of sort of surrendering to, because people have this fixed budget. So maybe less is actually more. There is a question I know we're going to get to in the Q&A, and someone was asking, what about two-way conversations? And that is really an important, we see that for a lot of the organization that we're benchmarking, both for SharePoint intranets, and we also do a large benchmarking study on Viva Engage, is this a mix of one-way and two-way communication channels. So often we see organizations are using the email SharePoint to get the, well, that really represent the one-way conversations. Ryan made some very good points about allowing people to do some quick feedbacks. There was the Net Promoter Score that you saw the comments that because it's 2:30 a.m. in the morning, I said it was electronic NPS. Of course, it's employee NPS, but the ability to get feedback by email. But of course, much deeper two-way conversations can happen in in Viva Engage. So that combination of actually all three tools, email, intranet, and Viva Engage is a really good blend.
I think, Kai, that's a big part of, you're sparking discussion at that point within the organization, right? The work we do with things like surveys, that helps you get a feedback channel for your communications. But what gets super interesting with things like Viva Engage, or whether it's Teams or Slack or the likes, is then to see and track and monitor the dialogue that spins up between people within your organization based on the data and the message that you're putting out there. So that's where I think that becomes really interesting to look at the two of those things together.
So a point I want to raise, because as we've been talking about, the intranet is really that is the place that, I guess, that container for some of that long value or long-term value content. Is that it's a pretty good way to start to think about AI, generative AI, and building an AI bot on top of your intranet. But that, of course, means that you're going to make sure that the content is up to date. And we talked some about some of the differences between email and intranet. And there's certainly a content governance challenge with intranets, and especially if you want that to be used for an AI chatbot. Then the content will really need to be good. You can just imagine what happens if you've got loads of outdated content. And Gemma, you're talking about these the PDF files. Some of them might be, there might be a totally uncontrolled duplication. So many different sites on the intranet have different versions of that policy because they all copy it and say, oh, I'll have the performance review policy on my intranet site too. And then they update them. So if you have outdated content, then AI will also deliver wrong responses. So we've got to be very careful with that. Let's talk a little bit about AI, maybe in a bit more detail as well. I wanted to show you something that we're doing. So it's not just about having, I guess, AI sitting on top of the intranet content, but actually you can use AI also to help you understand what your intranet analytics are doing. Here's a little screenshot from our dashboard, and the first thing I'm just showing you here, some of these, I guess, normal intranet statistics numbers that I'm sure many of you are familiar with, where you can see how many people are reading and times of day and what the top pages and news and files and suddenly what that is. And I think there's a big opportunity for AI to help internal communicators understand and decipher these numbers. I think also we as product vendors in this space have an obligation to make it easier to understand this, and I guess AI has provided a fantastic opportunity for us to make it easier for you to get your head around what all the numbers mean. So that's what I'm sort of just showing here. But actually, maybe, Gemma, if we go to the next one, one of the things that I think that are really interesting is that when we think about that intranet content being AI ready, making sure that we have the right things showing on the screen and all those things, is it's actually to get more deeper into insights that help understand the quality of the intranet. The quality of the pages. You remember I was talking about the leak score before for understanding complexity of text, and I talked about this thing about headings and how long heading is and the heading to paragraph ratio. That actually are things that make things easier to read. And wouldn't it be nice if there was a metrics that could give you a score of that? So we use a concept we call the health score for internet content, and you can see on the right hand side that the health score is made up of metrics around engagement, which is really how long time do people spend reading something compared to how long it is. So it's basically saying how many words have you written, and therefore with 250 words per minute, how long time should it take to read compared to how much time they spent reading it. This example here is rounded down to 0, but it actually is just really saying that most people are spending between 0 and 14 seconds on this, so not a lot of time. And you can see there's a quality in the middle. There's actually, unfortunately, there was a spelling mistake made in this content. The good thing was there was no broken links, but it's really not good, is it, when you're putting things out that unfortunately have got broken links in them? So checking broken links Aging content is an important one, especially from an AI perspective. If your intranet has loads and loads of content you never clean up, well, it gets like fruit in the refrigerator, right? At some point, you should probably clean it up and get it up before it gets too smelly. We have an industry colleague, Suhani, that told me about this the refrigerator example, and I got that smell, like, oh, don't turn green, and you don't want that same experience with the internet.
I think, Kai, the great expression there is that it ages like milk, not like wine.
Yeah, that's a really good one. That's a good one, right? If you take all these things together into the health score, actually that means that you can then easily find out what pages you should really be fixing on the intranet. And you're sort of seeing that on that little that row I've highlighted on the left-hand side with position descriptions. We're really saying that's a page you really ought to fix. So it gets a score 40, and it's a highly visited page, so that go off and fix it. And that's both because it needs to be updated. As I said, for AI, it's going to be struggling to deliver some good responses when it looks like that. So I hope some of these insights can help you also make more evidence-based decisions. You can always refer back to the benchmark report from both from ContactMonkey and from SWOOP Analytics. As Ryan was saying, data and evidence goes a long way to convince your boss to do something. If you've got someone saying, we must push out 10 news articles a week, you can go back and say, well, Gemma and Ryan and Kai said that, no, we don't have to do that, because we've got to be very mindful of the time budget that our people have. So maybe we shouldn't do it today. Maybe we should combine it with something else and do it tomorrow. So, but maybe I'll hand over to you, Gemma, again. I'll just do a bit of a summary of the things we've covered today, and then hopefully we can get to the Q&A as well.
Yeah, well, I'll finish up now. I'm just going to say this: the health of your intranet. Honestly, I used to block out every Friday afternoon and just manually go through pages just to check spelling mistakes last time content was updated. So if I had something like this, honestly, my life would have changed and I would have got my Fridays back. So just finishing up, it's not letting me go to the next slide. Here we go. So key takeaways from today: it's not either, it's both. So use both channels and remember how they each complement each other. They all have their unique characteristics and strengths. So talking about exactly that example that we've just used, PDS for email, but not for intranet, and always use those metrics to improve rather than prove. This is one of my colleagues. He uses this, and we want to move away from those vanity metrics. So many people have opened it already. So what was the objective? What do you want them to do? What did you want them to achieve? Did they achieve what you wanted them to say, what you set out? So just take that step back and always think about, what is the objective of this email? What do we want from this intranet page? And then use that data to really understand if it's working. I've got one more slide quickly before we go to Q&A. So, if you want to demo ContactMonkey, visit their website. If you want to find out more, it's brilliant. It's a brilliant tool. I hang out with the ContactMonkey team at conferences in the US. They have some amazing swag. I've got their socks at home, so they've got some great stuff. If you want to register for the SharePoint benchmark report, as I said, that comes out in May, so next month. It's amazing. We've got some great case studies from some of our super customers, and then the SharePoint Intranet Festival would definitely sign up for that. So for the US, we've got Citi talking, we've got Comcast talking, and Prologis. We had Comcast talk at one of our other events, and they have the best contact. They have Wicked, so they had actually the Wicked film on their intranet, so don't miss that because it is amazing. So I can't see my screen, so I don't know, can someone go to Q&As for me?
Yes, absolutely.
Do people want to come off mute? What do we want to do with Q&As? Is there anyone feeling brave? Ask questions to us?
Maybe we just let people just ponder over that, that, oh, am I going to unmute? And then I'll cover some of those that I've already posted some questions in Q&A. So we did have one from Kip saying, I hope you plan to address two-way communication and group conversations as a part of this, because email isn't so great for that. And I think we probably cover that a bit.
Yep.
There might just be one very quick little idea. We call it the 1, 2, 3 rule in SWOOP, and it's a golden rule that we came up with 10 years ago based on analyzing lots of data. And the 1, 2, 3 rule is really simple. It's one for having good conversations. It's for every time you do one post, then do 2 replies and then 3 reactions. And the reason for that is that my mother always said, "Kai, you got one mouth and 2 ears. Use them proportionally." And the reactions is more, to make sure that, it's like nodding, isn't it? When people are nodding and saying, yes, I agree, that sort of stuff. So the 1, 2, 3 rule is great for conversations.
Yeah.
Now, I think there's one here from, this is from William Fox saying, I have a manager who doesn't want to delete all articles in the intranet. This might be for you, Gemma. How do I convince him that governance and a clean intranet will help engagement?
Yes, you tell him it's not an archive. If they want to keep their data, if they really want to move it onto something else like Teams, or create another SharePoint that you can just archive stuff on if you need to. But I just think it just creates a big, and so when people search as well, they're searching on your intranet, they're getting old content, it makes it messy for you. At one job, I gave people like 3 strikes, and if they're not deleting that, I went in and deleted it. So it's such a good feeling pressing that delete button. But if they won't take anything off the internet, I would suggest work with IT, get them to spin up maybe just another SharePoint site for you, or whatever you're using, an area within Teams or something like that, and just archive that content, because it is the only use it sounds like is to your boss. It's not useful to, your other colleagues. So just encourage that, and tell him 93% of people are using the intranet and they don't want old content.
I think Gemma, to your point there, the approach to archiving is a thing, right? And so it's a big difference between, hey, all content is available at the highest level in a SharePoint deployment for all time. This is me putting on, by the way, a 15-year-old hat back in my SharePoint days. But, there's a place for archiving, and a lot of that boils down to how you structure your SharePoint environment, where that archival content lives, and the rationale for keeping it around. If you've got a records manager on the call here, they'll tell you, based on their industry or their, particular government regulations that they're under, you have to keep things, right? But it's where you put them. So to your point, it doesn't mess up the experience for the end consumer. So down ranking things from a search perspective, putting them over in a folder, under a site somewhere, and then automating as much of that as possible, right? So leveraging things like Power Automate, or my previous role at Nintex, using that kind of workflow technology to go through on a regular basis and find that content, notify people, hey, is this still relevant? Is this still current? Should it be updated? Should it be moved some other place? Because expecting people to do that manually, my own personal experience, is pretty rare. As Gemma's bold that you carved out that time on Friday to do that cleanup. But when you start getting intranets with, you mentioned Comcast, like the scale of an intranet for a company like Comcast, that's pretty hard to do. So you need a good automation strategy there to drive that archival behavior.
Yeah, definitely. And that's the thing. That's why I had to do it on a Friday, because my intranet editors just didn't have the time or didn't want to. And you get it, don't you, when it comes to intranets?
There are a couple of fast questions for you, Ryan, about one is from Mary, who's saying, what do you consider high engagement rates? I think that was in the context of the ENPS scores.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because Kai, it's a bit like you mentioned, you have the luxury with email that people open email and then it's right there. So unless someone deletes something straight away without even opening it, at which point you should seriously question the subject lines that you're using and what the initial copy looks like. But the engagement rate tends to be fairly high in terms of open, and then it starts to boil down to what you're seeing in terms of click-through rates. And one of the challenges of measuring email for us in aggregate, the challenge is we don't necessarily know the intent of each communication. So we don't know, hey, this is a message asking people to take their compliance training, and therefore we'd expect 100% click-through rate on it. So that can blend out the for us in aggregate, that can blend out the data. For you, you can actually drill down into that. So you have the ability to look at your different types of email and see the segmentation within each of those. And so obviously from a read perspective, we would expect very high numbers for corporate communications. Most of the time people are opening it up, giving it a quick scan, trying to understand if things are relevant for them, and then moving on. And so at that point in time, you can start to look at things like your ratio of content to links, how much time people are spending in there. Are they just doing a quick read and deleting it? Are they reading it and taking some action? So it's hard to give an exact, what's a great score look like. But certainly for most comms, we would want to see a basic open and a read time, and that's getting into a bit like you talk about your 6 minutes for intranet. That someone's giving it a 6 to 10 second cursory examination. Is this relevant to me? If yes, what do I have to do? If no, okay, I'll delete it and move on.
Got it. There's also another, just a quick follow-up question to Ryan. Monday 10 a.m. I think you said same time across all types of industries. And then Alison's asking, what industry types were used to collect that data?
Yeah, so one of the things
Katie actually Katie already responded. Sorry, I'm just opening the I failed to open the response, and Katie's already responded to this.
Okay, there we go. That makes it easy then.
Okay, so I think we'll skip in the interest of time, because we only got a couple of minutes left. Let's see if we can get through a few more. Here's another one from Kip about intranets. Are these statistics accounting for manufacturing environments, or is it mostly assuming a white collar workforce? I can probably talk a little very briefly. Kip, it's both. Right, we had organizations that had both frontline and like a desk-based users, but the desktop was actually a really dominant use. I think it was something 98% of people still access the intranet on desktops.
Yeah.
Then there's one here that could go maybe both to you, Gemma, and to Ryan. It says Jeremy is saying our intranet is built in SharePoint, and we just enabled the ContactMonkey web plugin. What type of content do you find work best in this space?
Oh, that's a good one. So awesome. Ryan.duguid@contactmonkey.com. Reach out. Love to have a conversation with you directly about that. So early days for us. We released the integration back in December, and we're still digging in to understand who's using it and for what reasons. When it comes to homepage of the intranet, typically what we're encouraging people to do is think about the company-wide communications, the CEO newsletter, financial reporting, bits and pieces like that. Those sort of annual and quarterly messages that you'd be pushing out that are relevant to the whole organization. Also in there, more timely things. So things like compliance training that's required, or urgent communications. Typically what we're seeing resonating on that homepage level. And then it boils down from there into, a world where you get into more distributed based communications. And just for everyone's, knowledge, I've been with ContactMonkey now for 3 months. So some of this, is interesting now, piecing together my backgrounds in intranets and email. But once you start to get to more distributed based communications, then it's back to that notion of personalization and segmentation. So if you've got a well-structured SharePoint environment, apologies to those of you who don't, that's a thing too. But if you have a well-structured SharePoint environment, you start to think about, what's happening in the HR site, what's happening in the product site, in the R&D site, what's happening in, finance and facilities. And so at that point in time, what we're encouraging people to do is then go down into each of those sites and target the specific messages relevant to people who are looking for that type of content. So again, things like, benefits and payroll and bits and pieces like that, any comms around that HR side of the business, push that down into a web part that's sitting on your HR subsite within your corporate intranet. So the high level stuff, try to make that all company and urgent, very timely content. And then once you go below that, think of that more as the rhythm of business within any of those different business functions.
Yeah. Thank you, Ron. And Gemma, back to you to say, I guess, farewell.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for everyone joining us today. If you want to reach out as well, we are available on LinkedIn. I love making new connections. Yeah, that's it. But thank you. Thank you for taking the time out today. Contact Ryan, myself, Kai, If you have any questions, if you want to find out more about SWOOP Analytics or ContactMonkey, just get in touch, let us know. But really do appreciate you sharing your hour with us today, and thank you for taking the time and effort to come and listen to us talk.